Alright, I guess it's time to talk about the Nintendo Switch Pro, because it's kind of insane to think about, but it has already been an entire year of Nintendo Switch Pro rumors and leaks and reports. I mean, there's been so much talk about some sort of mythological upgraded system, a Switch that could apparently play games at 4K on your TV, better screen, better battery life, and most importantly, in my opinion, a better frame rate. But here's the issue. The Nintendo Switch Pro, it never showed up. I mean, I'm filming this video on like September 30th here at midnight, and I don't have a Nintendo Switch Pro. Do you? Well, apparently things did not go according to plan. There's a new report I want to look at today that claims that we were supposed to get the Nintendo Switch Pro this year, but some stuff just got canceled. And I want to look at the facts, and also Nintendo's very funny just denial of any of this stuff even existing. What's up, gamers? Dreamcastguy here, and today we're just taking a little tiny rant at this stuff right here, which is over on Bloomberg. Developers are making games for a 4K Nintendo console that doesn't exist. At least 11 companies, including Zynga, have tools from Nintendo to make 4K Switch games. Now, this is another report by Mochizuki. Now, this guy is the dude who's been basically doing all the big Nintendo Switch Pro leaks, so clearly he's decided to double down on this. But I want to show this thing because some of the stuff it says in here is very, very fascinating. Some of this stuff definitely makes it seem like we're supposed to have a Nintendo Switch Pro already, but the chip shortage completely screwed all of us. Many people were surprised to learn that Nintendo's new video game console is missing a common feature of the rival systems: support for high-fidelity 4K graphics. Perhaps most perplexed were the numerous developers who are working on 4K Nintendo Switch games using a software toolkit. Now, this is a gigantic red flag. Employees at 11 different game companies said their teams were in possession of Nintendo's 4K development kits for the Switch. The companies span the globe, ranging from large publishers to small studios, including at least one studio that never made a console game before, which is Zynga. Now, you guys know Zynga originally just made Farmville and stuff, crappy Facebook games, and now they make some very profitable cell phone games. So it's interesting that they actually have a development kit. The latest model of the best-selling Nintendo Switch is set to go on sale just October 8th, which obviously is next week. I got mine pre-ordered. It sports a better screen that's larger, it's cool, it's great, it's OLED, and it's $350. But, as we all know, the Switch OLED, it's just a better screen of the exact same Nintendo Switch. Here's where the article definitely just gets much spicier, because it starts to talk about, well, some concrete, apparently rumors about the Nintendo Switch Pro's release date. A system capable of handling 4K Nintendo Switch games isn't expected to be released until late next year, people familiar with the plans have said. That means that we're getting possibly this Nintendo Switch Pro in winter of 2022. Now, they talk here about how basically it's hurting their stocks and stuff because every other system, the Xbox Series X, the PlayStation 5, these things are outputting at 4K pretty easily at this point. This is the only system that is not able to get anywhere close to it. Now, here's what's funny is that they mention here Nintendo has already responded to this article, like even though it's the middle of the night, but here's the official statement from Nintendo. Now, let me just make this extra clear. This is Nintendo's LTD. This is the main corporation. This is not the happy little Nintendo Twitter. There's no freaking Mario memes or pictures of Chris Pratt. It's this. A new report on September 30th falsely claims that Nintendo is supplying tools to drive game development for a Nintendo Switch 4K support. To ensure correct understanding among our investors and customers, we want to clarify that this report is not true. We also want to reinstate, as we announced in July, we have no plans for a new model other than the Nintendo Switch OLED model, which will be released next week. Now, I do laugh that Connor Eats Pants immediately said, "No one believes you. You hate your customers. Young boy better." Connor Eats Pants, very funny streamer. Here is what I think. Nintendo is, of course, going to say this. I want to go back to the article here in a second, but let's just say this. Every year, Nintendo has had a new version of the Switch. You had the base model, you have the freaking the revision, which had a slightly better battery life. Then we had the Switch Lite. Now we're getting the Switch OLED. Nintendo loves to do this. They've done this with every single system. You get the Game Boy, then you get the Game Boy Color, then you get the Game Boy Advanced, then you get the DS, the DSi, the DS Lites, the DSi freaking walk around the store with a big old pink Hello Kitty. Every year, you get a new Nintendo product. This is what they love to do. So the idea, timeline-wise, of getting a Nintendo Switch Pro next year, like roughly just throwing that energy out into the universe, just that definitely makes sense. But let's go back to the article. So Bloomberg here just starts basically just outlining their track record of how correct they've been. They were the people to first leak the details of the Switch OLED, but they were also the people to talk about 4K capability, which ended up not coming out. It's unclear exactly when the design changed. The reason, according to a person familiar with Nintendo's hardware planning, was the component shortage, a far-reaching problem born because of the pandemic. After unveiling the Switch OLED, Nintendo said it had no plans for releasing any other consoles at this point. Now, basically, here's some stupid stock stuff. I don't care about that. But what's interesting to me is the fact that this development kit is apparently being passed around. This development kit is apparently in use. Like, people are actually working on big, gigantic, beautiful games for this new Switch already, which kind of makes me curious to think, which projects could those be? Now, I like the fact that they actually kind of just talk about the fact that the current Nintendo Switch dev kits, they already have extra memory to basically let you program incomplete games. This is a bit more like Inside Baseball, but when a game is not yet finished, typically they run like garbage. Like a lot of times I've heard people tell me like when they're working on the game, it'll run at like 10 or 12 frames a second and stuff because they've just not optimized it. So they put in extra memory, extra power, extra stuff to basically make it so it can run your incomplete janky game. But they're saying this: the new one runs stuff but at 4K, so this is extra powerful, preparing for what may be a pretty beefy system in fact. Not just better resolution, but hopefully just better visuals across the board. Now, here's what's interesting to me is that they talk more about the fact that the Nintendo Switch is falling behind, it can't keep up with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, but here's what I personally find the most fascinating is right here at the end, which is where they basically say that while 11 people are talking to Bloomberg about this, the actual amount of dev kits is possibly much higher. There could be tons of studios from big, small, all sorts of groups that are currently working on these 4K Switch games. They're just not as open to talk about it. But here's what's actually just sticking out in my mind. Nintendo could decide not to release a 4K Switch. The Kyoto, Japan-based company quietly shelved numerous products over the years for strategic reasons. One noteworthy example is a sleep monitor called Quality of Life that the company unveiled in 2014 and never sold. So basically they're saying that even with people currently working on 4K Switch games, we may never actually see them. Personally, I really hope this exists. I play a lot of games on my Xbox Series X and my PlayStation 5, and to be honest, even if it does come to tiny indie projects, everything does look better on those next-gen systems. Like 4K, it's one of those things that I feel like a lot of people don't consider to be that important. Like a lot of times people are like, gameplay is king, but when you see stuff in some truly crisp visuals, gigantic vistas, huge gigantic events in like Final Fantasy XIV running on the PlayStation 5 with hundreds of tiny details all on screen and easy to understand at once, this stuff is just so gorgeous. It really feels like that stunning next-gen experience that a lot of us have been craving. But here are some thoughts that I kind of am just the most stunned by. I'd seen a lot of like Nintendo fans saying one of two things. The thing is like, I don't care about the Nintendo Switch Pro. I'm already happy with my Nintendo Switch. Or some people just claiming that this is going to be like the Switch 2. Like maybe this isn't going to be a Pro. This is the beginning of the next Nintendo Switch. This is the dawn of whatever we're getting after the Nintendo Switch. Something that's going to play current Switch games. But this stuff, these new projects that are being worked on, they might not be compatible with your current Nintendo Switch, which is something we do have to consider. So I want to wrap up this video with just a fun little tweet I found, which is this guy with like a Splatoon character profile picture. And you guys know I'm completely obsessed with Splatoon, but essentially what he says this. he does not want to buy a Switch OLED because he knows for a fact that we're probably going to get a Switch XL, or, stuff like we're probably going to get this Switch Pro at some point. And it's funny to think that even the most hardcore Nintendo Switch people at this point realize that Nintendo is probably planning something big, something new, and it's probably coming very, very soon. But I guess we're going to find out. Like, the idea of this coming out next year, specifically next winter, it seems like it kind of lines up with some of the other talks. Like, what if this is something like, I can imagine a Switch Pro running on that, like, open world Kirby game, Bayoneta 3, or hopefully something like Metroid Prime 4. Those would be great experiences that show off the 4K visuals. They show off that next gen taste that I think a lot of us would love to see Nintendo at least try and attempt, especially if it has some decent frame rates. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to look at these reports? Do they seem funny to you? Or does this just seem like some leakers doubling down on some goofy leaks? I mean, at this point, there's no way we're even going to know until next year, but as it stands, it's certainly fun to think about. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all, and keep dreaming. I gotta stop filming videos at midnight. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.